Thank you everyone for joining our webinar series. We're going to present in the next 2 months, so it's not going to be just this webinar. We're going to have the whole series and we're going to talk about migration to the cloud. The webinars are intended for companies that already decided for the cloud, but are struggling to find the best approach and practices how to move it. So if you're among those companies, you're definitely at the right place. Today, we are going to share our experience gained on more than 150 data warehouse projects and more than 20 migration projects we did to the date. And we are going to start with a short company presentation. So a few words about Insight, and then my colleagues will continue with migration best practices approaches. Company Insight has been established 11 years ago as its own entity, and it's based in Ljubljana, Slovenia. We have already 60 employees focusing only on analytics, so end-to-end data management solutions. We have 24 consultants with more than 10 years of experiences, and as mentioned, we have done more than 150 successfully completed projects. Now, for successful partnership, we consider it crucial to understand customer business, and to provide the highest quality of service, we need to have proper technical expertise. And this is why on every project, we invest heavily in knowing customers' business processes to pick the best possible technology that would fit customer needs. We are focusing on these 5 technologies that you can see on the screen, with biggest focus on banking and insurance, following by telco, retail, and energy. We have done migrations from various traditional on-premise platforms such as IBM, Microsoft, all the way to SAP, to the most modern platforms such as Snowflake Data Cloud, running on different public cloud infrastructures from Azure to AWS, and of course, Microsoft Azure solutions. So we believe these are currently best-breed technologies when it comes to the data warehousing, but of course we have other automation solutions that we're going to tackle a little bit today, but the focus on those automation tools and how to manage and do migration as fast as possible, we will have a separate webinar focusing on that area. Our focus is on consulting services. We are quite technology biased, and we are actually the customer advocates, because we're going to always choose technology that fits to the customer needs. So the architecture, the implementation, education of the advanced analytical solutions, we provide everything from advisory and consulting, data management, performance management, data science services. For a mid-sized company, we even provide fully managed services, meaning we basically take care of the whole process, and customer usually just does the reporting at the end. And from 2016 on, our strategy is actually cloud first. We have actually really consulting approach, and we rather try to move as much knowledge we have to the customer team than locking the customer in. Since most of the companies, or let's say at least most of the big companies, already have data warehouse in place, and replacing or migrating the existing data warehouse is not really a trivial task of moving just data from one database to another. We always start with workshops. So where should I start? What needs to be discussed? Or how can I train my people the optimal way? What would be the potential costs and benefits? All these questions are something we're going to address today and on the later webinars. So before passing the microphone to my colleague Katja, who will continue with the presentation, just invitation to our upcoming webinars where we're going to go really technical. On March 4th, we're going to do an Netezza to Snowflake migration. We're going to follow up with MS SQL on-premise to Snowflake migration. Oracle Exadata, and then we're gonna start, or we're gonna tackle also this automation part with data movement solution called nfarm, which is used for syncing on-premise data to the cloud, and Data Merlin data warehouse automation tool. Now, I'm gonna pass the microphone to Katya, who's gonna start the actual presentation of how to tackle the migration project.
Okay, thank you, Clement. Let's start with the reason why we decided to create the Great Migration series of articles and webinars. The data migration projects have a notorious reputation for being both highly challenging and prone to failure. In fact, according to the Gartner report, more than 80% of data migration projects exceed their deadlines or budget, and in some cases even fail entirely. Which leads us to the conclusion that on-premises to cloud migrations are anything but simple. But despite the complexity data migrations are a fact, they are inevitable because of the many compelling benefits cloud platforms have to offer. But luckily, they can be well managed if we are well prepared for them. So I hope you will find some useful information from our content, and that this will help you to get among that highly desirable 17% that where successful migrations happen. Preparation is the key to success. As you can see from the schema, the preparation phase is the foundation layer on which all other migration steps are developed. From design, ETL code conversion, data migration, validation, data ingestion, to report reconciliation, user acceptance testing, parallel running, and final production go live. And if the foundations are not strong, then the whole pyramid may sway. So it really pays to devote enough time to be well prepared. There are two key activities that we do at the beginning of each project: customer enablement and migration readiness assessment. And our approach is based on ensuring the least possible risk at every step of the project. Primary purpose of enablement is to empower the customers with guidance through all the topics, through all the questions that need to be addressed before making the final decisions about migrations. Just to mention some of the topics that we cover during these workshops. First is the introduction to the Snowflake and migration framework. To be able to embrace a cloud platform at its maximum, you must be very familiar with all the capabilities it offers. And the better understanding of the new platform also helps in discussions about potential first wins that you can achieve. And this is something we always strive to, so that you can get some results and value in the shortest possible time, because this will bring higher confidence and motivation among users and stakeholders. Another subject that we touched during the enablement is the sharing of best practices we gained on numerous data projects, lessons we learned, and the innovative technology assets that can help you accelerate your journey to the cloud. Then we debate potential migration challenges so that you are familiar with what can come along the way. And if one thing is certain, it's that always something comes along. One of the most common reasons for project failures are unrealistic scope, timeline, or budget definitions. To avoid this obstacle, you should take the time to do a detailed analysis and a full assessment of your existing system. You should know in detail what are you migrating, because over-the-thumb estimates can create a very distorted picture of the required effort. Another thing you should be aware of is that Migration will touch everything from data sources and ETL procedures to reporting applications and everything in between. And the more the existing system is customized and the longer you use it, the more attention is expected to be needed. Because this is the exact time when all the skeletons will come out of the closet. Related to this one is also the lack of internal resources. For example, legacy application developers who are not available, or busy project team members that are occupied with other activities, or missing knowledge about the current system component that is part of the migration. And all this could have a major effect on meeting the deadlines. If the selected approach includes data warehouse modernization, then it's a very high probability that you will need to run a project dedicated to data quality in parallel. And finally, during the enablement, we define a brief project overview and a roadmap, which is further defined in more details during the migration readiness assessment and next steps. Migration readiness assessment is a series of in-depth interactive workshops that on one hand focus on very technical subjects such as workloads, tools, development and deployment processes, and on the other hand on overall architecture, migration strategy, roadmap, the whole project management. In case of bigger or more complex migration, we do these activities together with Snowflake professional services. And now the first thing that we would like to achieve during these workshops is to ascertain key information regarding your business and technical needs, expectations, and priorities. Why is this important? Because data warehouse migration is usually not a project one would look forward to. Often it is even unwanted, but it must be done because the legacy system is at its maximum capacity and cannot be scaled anymore, or it must be done as a precondition for completing a larger innovation or modernization project. Regardless of the case, migration is really not a project that would be established for its own sake. And there are many compelling reasons why organizations move to the cloud, from gaining limitless capability, limitless scalability, high performance, to lowering the infrastructure cost and taking advantage of new big data capabilities, just to name a few. But there is no one-size-fits-all migration strategy. So you should be aware that not all the pathways will get you to the point where you will be able to harness all these benefits. The choice of most suitable approach depends on what primary goals you would like to achieve. For example, if you're running out of storage and you have a tight deadline because you don't want to invest in new costly hardware, then you should take different migration approach than in case you're migrating because you would like to benefit from advanced cloud capabilities that Snowflake has to offer and which were not possible in the current system. This topic is tightly connected with other migration readiness assessment objectives, which are to define and agree on overall architecture, migration strategy, cutover strategy, system testing and reconciliation strategy, to assign project team, project roles and responsibilities, and to deliver an end-to-end migration schedule, including a high-level plan and detailed list of migration tasks. These are the topics that my colleagues will talk more about it. I would only stress out once more that dedicating enough time to prepare a good data migration plan that will minimize disruptions and mitigate the risk is really important. I know that this is nothing new for you, but I'm also pretty sure that you're all very familiar with IT projects having tight deadlines and where you're being pushed to start with immediate implementation activities. But unfortunately, these kinds of rushing very seldom accelerate the projects. Usually it results in much greater project delays and budget overruns. To be able to avoid this, it pays to dedicate more attention to the project scoping. And to define a realistic scope, you should document an as-is architecture and do a full assessment of your existing data warehouse. The more knowledge of how the current system works is gained during the discovery phase, the better. And it's not only the data that needs to be migrated. There are multiple sources, staging areas, different database objects, metadata, ETL processes in variety of forms, orchestration processes, security schemas, authorization privileges, BI tools, reports, users, and other data consumers. And what is important, you should not forget about the business logic, about the data flows, and all the dependencies. The latter is particularly important in case of larger migrations, because if possible, you should avoid a big bang approach, and instead of only one and late go live, mitigate the risk and show value sooner by breaking the scope into several independent parts that can be migrated and released in several stages. Here I will hand it over to my colleague Luca.
Thank you, Katja. When it comes to migration, there is no universal migration strategy. Now, in order to select the best technology and the most appropriate migration approach, we must start at the very beginning and ask ourselves what drives us to move to the cloud and what are the main goals we are trying to achieve with the new platform. On the other hand, we need to ask ourselves what are the important functional and non-functional requirements. But we also need to clearly define and prioritize all the technical and business benefits we expect. And we should also note down all the downsides of not moving to the cloud as well. So there are three paths we can choose from when migrating to cloud. One is lift and shift. Then we have a complete redesign and lift, adjust, and shift. As the name suggests, with the lift and shift approach, we move your data warehouse to the cloud as is. So we are lifting it from your existing on-prem landscape and shifting it to the Snowflake environment. In this case, the logic of the code stays the same, but the code itself still needs to be adapted to fit into a new environment. And that can be a challenge as well. But luckily, Snowflake supports various syntaxes, which means we will need only minor corrections when it comes to migration. This kind of strategy makes sense if your existing on-prem infrastructure and maintenance costs are very high and you would like to reduce them immediately. Or if you're running out of resources and you don't want to invest in a new costly hardware. Then on the other hand, complete redesign means that we have to redesign your existing processes or even build a new one. But this means they will also better suit the new cloud environment. Reengineering is hard to avoid if your main goal is to eliminate the limitations and bottlenecks of the existing solution, or you would like to fully embrace cloud native capabilities, scalability, and elasticity that is available to you in that kind of environment. You should also consider reengineering if you would like to scale your data ecosystem and implement new types of data sources that could not be covered in your existing applications, such as real-time and streaming data, or if you would like to add a new data ingestion tool, or move to a new data visualization application, for example. Now, when comparing both approaches, it might look at first that if the lift and shift option is less expensive, but in a long run, it may not prove to be the most cost-effective one. Reengineering can reduce TCO because of the better cloud environment utilization, and it can also bring higher business outcomes. Because the re-architecture solution will be easily adjusted to meet new requirements because of its access to these innovative features of new platform that are available in Snowflake. For this reason, by our experience, many companies start with lift and shift and plan data warehouse modernization as the second phase of the project, or even break down the migration project and combine both approaches. But there's also an adjusted approach, which with a simple, how to say, improve step between lift and shift to leverage maybe just some of the advantages that cloud environment brings, or we just need to adjust some of the code that we would like to migrate to new environment. And we call this one lift, adjust, and shift. Once MRI or migration readiness assessment have been done and we have decided with what migration strategy we will go, we can now start working on our plan. Based on our experience we have gained on many migration projects, we provide our clients high-level plan that we will follow. This is a base for us and our customers, which allows us to define then detailed list of tasks and key milestones for each migration subject area. And of course, at this point, we must also not to forget to plan how we will switch newly developed solution between different environments, such as development, test, and production, which is in case of Snowflake pretty much straightforward compared to some traditional on-prem environments. This gives our customer some kind of confidence, so they know they are on the safe side when they decide to go with a migration project. So at this point, we should already know how much effort is needed and how our timeline for implementation will look like. This allows us that we can be pretty precise about the project scope, define realistic deadlines, and reallocate our resources across the project plan. But of course, there are also unknowns. And in this case, we go with the so-called prototyping approach so that we can understand what to expect and estimate how much effort will be needed to finish some of the tasks. Based on this, we can then easily multiply a number of similar tasks with the estimated prototype and get a precise estimation for the full scope of similar tasks. For example, when your current solution includes a lot of complex ETL jobs. When it comes to the project management, our team is certified in several different project management methodologies, such as Prince2, Scrum, or PMP. But we are always open to work with our clients and adopt the project management approach that best suits them and their team is used to work with. From our experience, we know that achieving quick wins is the way to go, so that the client can benefit from migration process as quickly as possible. And this is how we usually set the project plan, and of course, strictly stick to it through whole process of migration. With this, we think that it is really important that customer starts using and testing new solution as soon as possible. This may give a customer some of the new ideas that we can add in the next phases of migration, or even adjust already implemented one. On the other hand, people or team and good communication between them are key to successful implementation. This is why we define our team members, set their roles and responsibilities at very beginning. Then to avoid potential issues, we support frequent and regular communication by organizing weekly meetings led by our project management team, and support our customers with weekly and monthly reports so they can always be up to date on where we are and how we are doing in the process of migration. And last but not least, we are always trying to be prepared, especially if something goes wrong. This is why we set escalation metrics with clearly defined flow to support quick decisions in case this is needed. And maybe just a few words on project team roles and responsibilities. When it comes to migration project and data warehousing migration projects in general, it is really important to understand that this is not just an IT project. It requires as much collaboration from the business side as it does from an IT. So another important point to consider is that the larger the project is, larger project brings more complexity. And in this case, the role of our project management is really important. And project manager is the role that is always a part of our implementation team. What the team should look like is defined by the implementation strategy. We always include key roles such as the lead architect, who takes on an overall architecture aligned with the customer requirements and then ensures that the implementation process runs smoothly as soon as mid-senior consultants and data engineers take on the process of implementation. Another key role that we cannot leave out is an industrial specialist. His role is to ensure that the business requirements are aligned with the technical team. And this is something that it makes us different. And like I already said, we always support the idea that the business should be part of the migration project. We also think that customer team members should be part of the implementation process. This helps us to easily and much faster transfer the knowledge and required skills on a real cases. Sometimes may happen that customer team members lack of some skills. And in this case, our certified trainers can help them to acquire the knowledge in workshops that we usually organize before the development process starts. With the COVID-19 situation, we all figured out that we are able to organize and work remotely. And in case of migration project, again, if managed properly, we do not see any obstacles and threats that this type of work would influence on the success of the project. But again, like I have already said, projects are people, and we think that on-site visits, if possible and when possible, are important, especially at the beginning of the project. Now we'll let Grega go on.
Super. Thank you, Luca. Hello, everyone. So we will look now a little bit at the implementation phase and what we have learned through all these years and on all those implementation projects. So we decided at the end to divide, let's say, this area in 3 main phases. So we call it design. And this is the one that usually people like to do fast as possible, because as Katja mentioned also, usually all projects, IT projects, are always in some hurry. So you are either running on some specific deadline that you have to catch. Also on the migration, this is a quite usual approach, as also Luca said. So let's say the licenses of existing system is running out, so you have a very tight deadline. So it's not a moving deadline. And but I just cannot, let's say, emphasize enough that this design phase can save then at the end the implementation and the testing phase at the end. So it's really crucial that we spend here a lot of time. And we learned this the hard way because we were rushed and then we decided, okay, let's go. Everything is, let's say, known, so we can start the implementation, but then you go back and then these are the problems. So the idea of the design is to really have a detailed target architecture. I will talk a little bit more about this step. Of course, set up Snowflake platform, which is quite straightforward, I would say. But the outcome is a detailed project plan. That means that it can have, I don't know, a couple of thousands of lines, tasks, open issues, all detailed, explained, calculated, because at the end, all the migration projects are not something that you do in a month time, and usually it involves quite a lot of people in the process. And because usually a lot of clients want to speed up this process because, as Luca said, it brings benefits and you have tight deadlines, it means that more people will join, some things you would like to do in parallel. And that's why the project plan, a detailed project plan, is the basis for everything. So if someone says that after the 1 week, they can give you a detailed project plan, that's, like, in my experience, completely impossible. You know, we can give you a rough estimation of potential cost, like a maximum cost, what would be in a couple of days when we go through. But to have really a detailed plan and how many people will work, what will they do, then we need this detailed project plan. And if we have this, let's say, done efficiently, then the development phase is a standard development phase. The outcome is very clear, which means that it's much easier than maybe on some other projects because we are doing still a migration. That means that the end result is quite known. So we have to get probably the same numbers at the end. So that is why I say some parts are, let's say, easier than to now discuss again with business what they really need and what is the business, let's say, benefit of doing some analytical projects. So it's a little bit different here in this area. Of course, it has specifics, like I will talk about initial load and reconciliation that are main parts. But then at the end, it's a user-accepted testing and something that we learned the hard way to implement, let's say, a couple of months of parallel run so that everyone is 100% sure that everything works as it should. So first, the target architecture. So what is the idea? It's not just, okay, we are discussing Snowflake, but Snowflake is always run on some public cloud. And majority of our large clients want to have some AWS, some Azure elements inside, or some existing solutions, some existing AI platforms that they're using, and how this will fit in the overall data flow. What will be stored? Do we use an external sort of a data lake approach, or do we put everything in Snowflake, and etc.? So this is very important. Which tools we will use, because this depends, of course, what we will have to learn the client's team to use, and etc. So a lot of things, and really to explain in detail how we will do, let's say, integrations from the data warehouse, and etc. So it's really important, this. And this usually, a high level can be done, let's say, rather quickly on some decisions, but then it has to go into details. So all phases of the data flow, where it will be extracted, staged, where it will be transformed, and etc. So this is important. And of course, to see which are our user groups. So it's not just a BI tool and data scientists, but you can maybe have third-party integrations. You calculate something in the existing data warehouse. You push this back to the operational system. So we have a lot of integration, I don't know, with SAP or some other ERP system. So it really has to have this overall look and exact target architecture, how we will do this, because still some parts will be probably still on-prem, and then this architecture can be a little bit more complex. Regarding the Snowflake platform, so as Luca said, we've been working with Snowflake for 4+ years. I remember them meeting them in UK when there were just a couple of people in UK. I think this is some best practice that we'll also learn from them, working together with professional services team. So it's quite standard approach. So to define everything, learn everything about the platform, put all this knowledge to the client's team, and then of course that everyone is on board when we start working with. So we just named here a couple so that you can later go through when it comes to analyzing our presentation. So one important part, let's say, of each migration, or what would be the total cost or total time spent, it's of course the data integration process. We can call it ETL, ELT, whatever, but at the end, it's the data integration process. So it means it's important to look at two aspects always. So we have the scripts. So it means all kinds of scripts. One are simple ones, that means standard DML, standard DDL statements, because these are simple to convert. There are a lot of possibilities how to convert them. Also, we have our own library that can convert this, so this is an easy task. Also, there is no administration in Snowflake, so if you're migrating, I don't know, from Oracle or SQL, no partitioning, no indexes, and etc. So it's a simplified approach, I would say, for that part. But then the hard part are stored procedures, PL SQL procedures, and etc. So standard SQL, it's not a big deal, as we will discuss in the later webinars, because it's sort of a conversion that you can really automate. But when it comes to stored procedures, and a lot of business knowledge is usually there, then this complexity, richness of such procedures can be an issue. And this is something to investigate in the initial phases to understand what would be really the effort. Because it can take, I don't know, 10 to 20 days for some very large procedure, PL SQL procedure, and how to migrate it. And maybe also it needs to be re-engineered, maybe because, I don't know, it uses cursors or something that is maybe really not efficient to do on Snowflake. And even if you're doing lift and shift, it could mean that it's impossible to get some good performance out of it. And the other part is, of course, the existing data integration tool. So majority of our clients that we migrated, they have the mixture. So there is just a few of them was that they were completely on scripts because they already did this transition to push everything on a high performance database, but majority of them is still using some ETL tool, let's say data integration tool. And again, here, the biggest emphasis from my side would be really think about what you can push down so that your tool can generate a push down job, so that you can optimize that job automatically in the tool. If the tool is not capable of doing this, like, I don't know, integration services, for example, from Microsoft doesn't have, Data Stage Informatica has this capability, but again, it depends how your job is done. Then it means that if you will be deciding for lift and shift, it means that this data integration tool has to be very near Snowflake. So it cannot be on-prem and then you push something and you process here and then you push again to Snowflake. So you will spend a lot of time, and also the traffic to the cloud, it's not the same as in your environment. So here a lot of, let's say, precaution has to be in place. And usually, my own experience, I think 99% of clients replace the existing data integration tool, not maybe in the first moment of the first phase of lift and shift, but then when we do the re-engineering, it gets out usually, because it means it's some part of the previous logic, technology, methodology that also change now with the cloud and powerful analytical databases. So always look also as the data integration when we are discussing, this is, I always call it a two-step approach. So one is the first part, extraction ODS. For some, this is already the data warehouse. Now it's, of course, lately it was popular to call this data lake. So dump everything as it is somewhere. But let's say in our methodology and in methodology of data warehouse, building it for 20 plus years, it means the extraction phase, or you put all the data there so that you don't burden the system, and then you can start your transformations. So this extraction phase, let's say, has a couple of things to watch out. So one is absolutely test your bandwidth. So can you, and how long does it take for your daily data to process? So if you generate, I don't know, 100 gigabytes of data, can you transfer 100 gigabytes of data by the night or by your batch window? That's, I would say, the first test to do. Then, of course, if your sources are on-prem, it's a much bigger, let's say, issue, and you have to look at what would be the potential best way to do it. Because we could not find it 4 years ago, tested a lot of things, we developed our own solution, and we use it for this migration type of workloads or just transferring the data so that we could do this efficiently in parallel. Because what is important, it's not just the bandwidth, it's also the extraction speed from your source system. So can we put, I don't know, 10 processes, let's say, in parallel, not just one, because we have to extract the data fast. So these are some important things. If you're doing cloud to cloud, there are a lot of possibilities. We are, let's say, partnering with Fivetran And there are a lot of other possibilities also from other vendors. So they are very good at cloud-to-cloud sync, very, very efficient. So it means just point and click. So you can replace your 100 ETL jobs with, let's say, just one part so that it can sync this data to the ODS part or extraction phase, or however you call this first phase. And then you have the second one, which is usually hidden in all the procedures or in all the data integration logic, is the transformation phase. So this one is still the hard part to do. It means it has to be somehow translated. So if it was in the scripts, it means translating scripts. If it was done in the ETL tool that cannot be pushed down, that means that the lift and shift will be quite an interesting and hard to do approach. So it's more of a re-engineering in that case, or at least try to lift some parts and re-engineer them quickly. When you select something, it's important that it supports push-down logic. So we work with Matillion here. These are for all those that like, let's say, graphical user interfaces, and for those all that like code-based, let's say, elements. So we developed our own solution that helps us do data warehouse automation, but you have a great alternatives like DBT if you want to code everything by yourself. So there are a lot of possibilities how to do this, and then it depends on your, let's say, your team at the end. That's why it's important, as Luca and Katja said, that we discuss with your team where you will be more confident than managing this. This is also very important. That's why we are quite open and offer a variety of choices when it comes to how we want to do something. Okay, then another important aspect, initial data migration. So how can we move the initial data to the cloud? So we talked about deltas, but how can we move 20 terabytes, 40 terabytes? So what will we do? So that's important. So here again, the extraction speed from the system, what is your bandwidth? So, and usually looking at alternatives. So let's say on AWS, we used a couple of times, let's say Snowball, so that it's physically transferred because it's a better service to go directly to S3 and then load it. So it's important. And also maybe to address in this phase, how can we get deltas from the existing system? Because this will be needed also later when you want to test the reconcile process, do the parallel run, see if the data matches and etc. So this is something important in the initial data phase to look out. Then the most, I would say, underestimated, but we learned again, unfortunately, the hard way, that we need a strong reconciliation data validation phase already in the development phase. So it's not, okay, we moved everything, now let us test it. So we have to automate the reconciliation process. Why? Because we know what we should get at the end. So we know the data we should get. These are the target fact tables, the target dimensions, they should be the same because we're doing a migration. Even if we change the logic how we are doing the ETL, doesn't matter. So the target is clear, it means we can automate it. We can take the data from the source system, see what's in Snowflake, load this, and do automation tests. So this is very important to have this framework in place and then to really do some things, let's say, automatically as much as possible. And also, if you didn't do this, let's say, previously on the existing system, we start implementing data quality rules. So that these rules are just SQL statements, can be profiling statements, can be standard business SQL statements, comparing some of this compared to some of that. But it's important that they begin then, let's say, their lifetime journey so that they are scheduled every day, so that they are part of your data warehouse. So when you load ETL, you also do the data quality checks so that people will be confident in your data warehouse. Of course, what to do when we have issues. So also this, it can happen that some old data was manipulated and we cannot recreate some parts. So again, this initial load is then mandatory approach in this case. So this is also something to address in this phase. Just for example, what I want to show you is, let's say, a capability of Snowflake, because we have the cloning capability, what we can do. Let's say we have this legacy database, we have some source, and we load this source through, let's say, just the extraction phase, so that we just look at this first, let's say, the ODS, how it looks like. But then we take the result and put it into Snowflake. So we have our own, but we also have the extraction, because let's say the extraction is the same. So we have the same extraction. But then what we can do is we run our process and compare it, do we get the same results? And if we don't need to again reload everything from that. We just clone Snowflake to the previous version that we created, and we rerun the tests again. And we rerun the tests again whenever we change our ETL until we get the same results. So there are really nice features in Snowflake comparing, let's say we are doing also with Microsoft Synapse projects, but these cloning capabilities, really these DevOps practices really shine, which were, let's say, almost impossible on traditional systems. So, and we can do then the same for data warehouse. So we load the dimension, we see how it looks like here, we load the delta, see how it looks like in the legacy, we push the results back, and we can then play here until we get the same results. And this is something that, let's say, our development team has to pass. So they have to check, yes, the test was passed. Not that this is then at the end, the UAT test by business users or by someone, because as I said, this can be automated. And at the end, we all save time. So we as an implementators and the client saves time because we don't have to have so many these, let's say, back checks when it comes to checking the data. So at the end, we have the user acceptance testing. So of course, usually, again, we put some BI platform on top. Everyone has some BI platform. They want to check the existing reports, compare it side by side, if it brings the same result. So in most cases, this should not return any big difference if we did the previous phase very well. But it can happen that also in BI tools, I don't know, in Power BI or in Cognos, they can drop some Excel inside and no one knows. So it can also uncover some things that no one knew they existed and etc. So it's good always to have this in place. And of course, some issues can always arise, but always then it means all the data quality should be always part of the process where you do the data quality check. So it's similar as with data governance. So when you go on such modernization project, you will also start the data governance initiative if you already did not, because usually it means you have to, again, of course, define what maybe was not defined properly years ago. So, and at the end, what we call a parallel run. So we don't have a specific, let's say, go live, but we always insist that we have at least a month or a couple of months of parallel run, because it showed that it's important. So, so that we can really compare the results to see that if it works as it should. So that's why, let's say, getting deltas from the existing system, existing data warehouse is so important, so that you can do automatic tests on, I don't know, weekly basis at least. If the daily basis is impossible because of, let's say, the bandwidth, the size of the data, whatever, then maybe weekly can be possible because maybe you're not working 24/7 and you have some spare amount where you could get that time slot to automate this. So this is in a rough way how we do and what we find really important and to focus on when you are doing the migration part. So maybe at the end, just to know that through all these years, we built some tools to accelerate this process so that we are, let's say, more efficient. We see this is one area where there are a lot of discussions. So as I said, in 4 years, a lot of knowledge has been put together, and some of the products that we used as an assets in-house, we are also offering to our clients as a part of specific solution they would like to tackle. So we have our own parser that does code conversion. It's quite smart and it builds some sort of, let's call it this, an object model, because it has to be more understandable. It's just not, I don't know, search and replace, because you can do this in text editor, but to really have the context. So because in Oracle, you have to switch the update statement, or you have to switch the, let's say, some cursor to work as a set operation. So it has to be much more smarter if you want to parse some heavy things on the project. And then we have our lift and shift tool and Farm, our parallel Python framework that enables us to transfer a lot of data quite quickly, and Data Merlin, which is suitable for those that will re-engineer the data warehouse to have everything run in the metadata approach. So everything, all the transformations are stored as mappings, as rules, and then this enables you also to switch different platforms quite easily. So this is something that, as Clement said, we will talk more on the future webcasts. Okay, I think this is it from our side. I'm just having some issues with Okay, sorry guys, I'm lagging. So we can, Claire, maybe we can take a couple of questions.
Yeah, let me check. Just checking. Okay. One interesting, how do you share roles between you as a service provider and customers? I guess in comparison with, with the current knowledge, their abilities to participate and so on.
Yeah, it means that usually, as Lucas said, this approach is always that they have to be always included. This is not like an outsourcing project where you outsource everything. So this, I think, it's an approach where we want to, let's say, give them the possibility to enable them and also to see then who should tackle which area, because existing teams also know a lot about the, let's say, existing solution, and it's impossible, let's say, just to say we will outsource this.
Okay. Should we do just lift and shift, or should you usually adjust some parts of the solution?
Yeah, usually it's always part is always adjusted, I would say. Again, it depends. If everything was done through SQL scripts or everything really on the database level, then maybe really a complete lift and shift can be possible and can be quite beneficial, and just some optimization, let's say, of some of the scripts depending on the logic. But whenever there is some ETL tool and ETL logic, usually it means that we need to do also some re-engineering, I would call it like this.
Okay. Another one, can you name a couple of issues that you have faced while migrating existing data warehouse system? Maybe some interesting issues that were faced.
One client, I remember, quite large data warehouse, around 40 terabytes plus. And when we did all the assessments, discussions, and then they say, yeah, and they already decided for the platform and everything. And then at the end, they said they have 100 megabit line, for some parts. So at the end, it happened, okay, we did a lot of possibilities, what to do. And then at the end, of course, at least for the migration project, they said they raised the line to a couple of gigabits because it was just like a no-go possibility without a better line. And then I remember now one that also was quite interesting is this, how we learned the parallel runway to run it, is that we went live, everything looked great, so everyone was happy, but then some integration was missing. So no one realized that integration was needed, or no one noticed that one, but it was some stored procedure executed by the external application. And what to do now, because it was quite important one. And 10 years of legacy and no one noticed some things. And then at the end, we had to quickly, because it was quite quicker to do the fix, we pushed down the Snowflake data back to the database, to the original database, so that while we fixed and created the needed interfaces on the new application by their team, we just loaded the data back that table that was needed by the existing process. So these are two that I can now remember that are a little bit strange.
Another one that this one is more linked to the Snowflake. You mentioned some unique features of the Snowflake. Can you maybe elaborate on what are the key features of the Snowflake platform comparing to, let's say, others?
Oh, well, got a lot of POCs. Luca was involved. I think that at the end, when we discuss with our clients, at the beginning, it's simplicity. I would say simplicity. So load the data and go. It's true. So this is the whole story. So no partitioning, no indexes, no administration, minimum tuning. It's super important. The second one, the biggest one when we see with larger clients, is this is isolation of workflows. So that we can run in parallel on the same table, whatever we want. So this is super unique, comparing also to any other, let's say, vendor at the moment. So it means that, you know, risk department can run their queries, whatever they want, and they always get the same response times, even if you are doing data integration in between, or if the finance is doing analysis, or if someone is doing heavy BI, doesn't matter. So this isolation, I think it's still the #1 feature at the moment for large organizations.
Okay, thanks, Grega. I don't see any other questions. Well, okay. With this, we're gonna close the session. Of course, everyone, you're encouraged to visit our webpage and to register for other webinar series where we're gonna go even more technical, as mentioned at the beginning. But for now, I'd like to thank you very much for your presence and see you quite soon. Thank you very much. Bye.